Remy, it's been a few weeks, but we are happy to have you back on the podcast because Gabe is away.
Well, when Gabe's away, I guess we're going to play. It rhymed too well. We had to use it.
Yeah, I'm not going to cut that out. Gabe is away on spring break with his family. And I made the joke, Gabe lives in sunny California. He's off on spring break. I'm a little bit jealous because here I am in Wyoming. It's snowing today. It's cloudy. I walk 6 miles uphill both ways to get to the office today. I'm ready for my spring break.
Both hills to get to the office
Oh,
in
it's tough to get over
in
those.
your family room that's down the hall from your bedroom.
You
Yeah.
know, well, we have to do what we can here. But anyway, not to be too dramatic, but one of the things I wanted to talk about today, now that Gabe is gone, is really how marketing has evolved and what companies are doing now in 2025. And I did want to kind of start the episode today with a look back to last week. We talked a little bit about Southwest Airlines. And one of the things Southwest has done is they've changed their baggage policy. So they're going to start charging for bags, which they typically have not done. And in response to this, one of their competitors here, Frontier Airlines, said they were going to do a free baggage promotion throughout the summer. And I was telling you, Remy, I really like when companies can react and respond to their competition in such a quick manner like that. The airline industry, as you know, is very commoditized. They focus very much on, as I said in the podcast last week, jokingly, speed and price, but they really do want that lowest fare. So, seeing how quickly people are responding to Southwest, I got to give props to that team that made that decision and was able to get that promotion built so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something very impactful about having a large organization such as Frontier, obviously keeping their ear to the ground in the industry. I mean, how would you not know that that's happening when they're a major competitor? But agility, the agile nature of large organizations like that isn't something that we see very often. So I think if any size organization can take a lesson from that, it's, twofold. One, keep your ear to the ground, know what's happening. Don't always worry about what the competition is saying,
There's a
but
point where
worry
it could
about
be
what they're doing.
obsessing.
Exactly. And it's more of a competition, us versus them. And instead you're not focusing on the consumer, which is something that we're also going to be talking about today. But I think just being aware and react accordingly and making sure that what you're doing, maybe it's not a huge lift for them to offer those free bags, but it's super impactful. And I'm excited to see, the results of that if they're ever going to share the increase in bookings that they're seeing versus Southwest.
Well, someone at both companies has a whole Excel spreadsheet, looking at the revenue lost and the revenue gained. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about Excel with Gabe not on the podcast.
Well,
So
leave it for him for next week.
we'll
We
touch
don't want to
base on
step
that in the
toes.
future. But one thing we should talk about, Remy, is how marketing has evolved. And just to think about how it's evolved, I think back to even when we were in college, at different times, but not just then, but even going back 100 years ago, and the technologies and the tools we use. So I think of the analytics, the intelligence, everything we've done to create value has changed. But the strategy itself, where marketing is about creating value, understanding, designing, and communicating, that really hasn't changed. I think it's all in the tools, and we continue to see this in 2025. So a few things I want to talk about today is, question for you, Remy: how has marketing evolved since you were in college or since you first started in the field? And then also going back to some mistakes that we'd like to avoid in 2025.
Absolutely. Well, I think just to kick it off, I know that there was a couple specific points that you wanted to hit on of marketing through the different eras. We've both had the luxury, and maybe yourself more than me, of working in corporate America or corporate North America, where technology and the internet is very much a part of the marketing landscape. When I first started my foray into marketing, there was still a very heavy leftover component of the traditional marketing set. And I think that with this evolution, something that I've seen, and I know a lot of others have, is there's a navigation away from the concern, from the proactive addressing of how we're not necessarily just communicating the value, but worrying about the perceived value. And the component of marketing that comes after the sale, which is that customer experience. Strategy is very important there because strategy is all encompassing. It's not just within a certain business vertical within sales or marketing or customer service. It really should be a business strategy across all, and looking at the customer journey from start to finish, and beyond, because customer lifetime value, I know we love to talk about it. It's important, right? The other thing that I very much noticed in the difference is, we're aware of what other companies are doing because everything is on the internet. So it's not, hey, I wonder what their new marketing campaign is going to be. You can look it up in Facebook ads library, which is a totally different experience than
Real-time insights. That's probably my favorite thing about modern marketing. In college, I took a class and it was all about the history of marketing, which we're going to kind of dive at a very high level into. Professor Zack is not coming out today. But if we think about marketing, I want to go back about 100 years, back in my prime, to the sales era. And I'm going to call this the 1920s or the 1940s, but this was following the Industrial Revolution. And what we saw here was companies were competing for customers. The goal was to sell as many products as possible and gain as many customers as possible. And when we talk about gathering this business, there's so many companies that did this. The Model T, the mass production, how do we sell this now? But one of the things I also want to touch on is there was zero focus on customer experience. And this is something, Remy, today that I think is one of the most important things to focus on: customer experience.
Absolutely. I can't, I've said it earlier, I'll say it again, and I'll say it every time I talk with my customers personally. We forget that the nurturing side of the customer experience is the most valuable. I don't know if you disagree, but I think that that's it when it comes to not necessarily worrying about retention, but ensuring that you're fulfilling on what you've sold the customer on. It's the end stamp on the efforts in marketing, right? Not just, hey, shiny object, come this way, but actually delivering and helping them become your marketers. Because person to person, hearing from a friend that X company is great and you need to try X product is so much more valuable than them seeing the 7 billionth Facebook ad or Instagram story ad that they've seen that week.
I'm glad you mentioned product, because it wouldn't be a marketing podcast if we didn't talk about the 7 P's marketing, which I think they're continuously adding to this list here. But when we think back to this sales era, I just mentioned that the goal was to sell as much as possible, get as many products out the door as possible. And that's where the marketers at the time would come in and, help make that happen. I think here in today, especially in 2025, the role of the marketer has evolved to a point where they're not just involved once the product is developed and it's ready to sell. They're involved in the actual development of that product or of that service now, which I think that's a very valuable time to have that marketing input and have that cross-functional team working together as one.
Absolutely. It's not necessarily on topic, but it's not off topic with where we're going with the conversation. I was sitting in on a webinar, and I can't recall who the host was, but they were talking about how marketing now is vastly different in that we also have access to everyone. If you conceptually think about it, you have access to anyone who has a phone or is online. Traditional marketers may be more comfortable with the kind of net style fishing where you're throwing a net into the ocean and you catch a bunch of fish and they're flopping around. But the truly effective marketers of today's day and age are using the old line and hook attack, where they're going into a very finite group, a niche group, where they're going past positioning as a brand and brand recognition, and they're going into, how can I help this particular group of folks see the features and values and benefits of my product or service and see themselves using it, see the value that it's bringing them, and hooking them on. So there's no chance of them flopping out of the net when they realize this isn't where I want to be. And that really rolls into that ongoing marketer role, as you mentioned, of not only making sure the product or service is positioned appropriately, but then how are our customer experience and support teams ensuring that we're constantly having that conversation, that reminder of how valuable it is and why they continue to pay or buy or be served by us.
Yeah, that's great. And following the sales era here, the next era of marketing, which I will just call the marketing era, and we'll call this up to the 1990s as well. But this is where everything you just mentioned, Remy, understanding the needs of your customers.
Mhm.
This is where we started to see some of that personalization as well. But we're actually going in and addressing specific customer needs. And as I was doing some research for this podcast, yes, we do our research here. Um, I came across an old Apple ad, and the headline of the ad, it was actually a video, but the main theme of the ad was the most powerful computer is the one people use. It's not about the gigahertz or the RAM or the memory size. The most powerful computer is the one people use. And this was an ad that came out around the 90s as well. And I just thought that was just a great example of how we're kind of changing to understand the needs of our customers and address them.
And the language that they're speaking. I think that's something that, you reference with Apple's ad. It's not about the gigahertz or the RAM or what have you, but it's about speaking their language and about ensuring that they can see themselves using it. I think, and maybe off topic a little bit here, but in the industry that we are in at Calix, there's a lot of technology type terms, I guess you could say. There's not a ton of layman's conversations when we're having these chats with our customers, or building networks and expanding networks. I think that we sometimes get away from, in effective marketing, really listing a lot of features and not necessarily speaking to the benefit. And that's a perfect example. Apple, we could brag about them all day. We can go in depth on their successes that they've had. But I think allowing all of the technological components to be removed and really simply just saying it doesn't really matter as long as the consumer is using it. It's a lesson for others and also a fantastic ad. I love it.
Yeah, and just bringing us from that digital age of marketing to today, which I'm going to call social marketing. Remy, you alluded to this earlier here, but just about everyone, a
Mm-hmm.
majority of the population is now living online to some extent. You have a smartphone, you social media, you have these real time connections that continue to evolve. And this is where we start to talk about, I've always been really big into digital marketing, using the data we have on our customers to really personalize that experience. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, the strategy is still there, but now we have new tools to execute on this. And this is where I really lean into that digital aspect. You know me though; I've always described myself as that data-driven marketer.
Absolutely. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Zach, and Gabe when he decides to come back from vacation. But I find too, as we have more, as we grow our tech stacks, as we expand our digital capabilities as far as getting in touch with consumers, there is also this interesting wave of the more traditional, like a desire, a craving for more traditional, personable interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And customers of ours, especially exploring, where does a phone call work best in the buyer journey? Where does a personal note to the consumer, where it's, maybe it's templated but it's personalized with their first name? We talk a lot about personalization in advertising as well. Those elements of those more traditional, the sales era, are kind of coming back around, but utilizing the tech stack in the digital marketing kind of component
Exactly.
to be
And
able to do it.
one of the areas I see this evolving is this is a conversation, Remy, I'm sure you can agree with me on, but I have a lot of friends who are saying, I'm trying to disconnect. I'm trying to be off my phone, or I'm deleting my social accounts. And it's going to be interesting to see, as this happens, where does marketing go next? Because yes, these hyper personalized experiences are great. I've always said especially with platforms like Google, you can turn on and off your personalized ads. I like my personalized ads being on because I do like to see content that's more relevant to me, something that it's going to resonate a little bit more, right? But it's going to be interesting to see, as technology evolves, as people start to maybe rethink some of their um, social marketing decisions as well, what that next step would be. And one of the data points I shared with you, Remy, here about a week ago was Gen Z is actually more inclined to pick up the phone and call than some previous generations. And I thought that was interesting because a couple cool data points from this same report was Gen Z is least likely to use email or to read emails, which was fascinating. And that's something, outside of me in the workplace, I totally agree with. If anyone emails me, do not expect a response unless of course it's, business related, then you've got my full attention. But I don't use personal email. Um, Text messaging, I'm not a big fan of receiving text messages from brands. I did have a fantastic customer experience just the other day where I had a bill due and they texted me to remind me that it was due. And it said like, reply yes to pay with, the card I had on file. And I didn't even have to open their app or go to their website. I just replied yes, validated. They asked for my name just to, check their records to make sure it was me paying, and it was taken care of. So I thought that was a unique experience. But like I said, traditionally, not a big fan of that SMS marketing. But then when we get into social, of course, that was where Gen Z, was really high up there compared to Gen X, baby boomers, things like that. But the two biggest things I want to call out from that report, going back, was Gen Z is more inclined to actually make that phone call or pick up the phone than we thought. And then Gen Z's not really into email marketing, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that Gen Z is not into email marketing because
And I shouldn't say they're not into it, but they're a
no,
much
but
smaller group.
yeah, and they've grown up in an age where their inbox is purely advertisements and purely spam marketing, right? So why go in there if all you feel like is you're going to have to delete 300 messages that have nothing to do with you, or you've got duplicates from a certain brand?
Well, this is the thing too, is how do you stand out in that inbox? If you're going to be doing not just email, but social ads, I think in general, but any kind of marketing, how are you going to stand out? I can't remember, what the statistic was on how many ads we see per day, but I mean, we've been blanketed with ads all day, all week, but I can't tell you the last ad I've seen just because there's so many. Also, I don't have that kind of attention span, but that's exactly it. How do you stand out in that crowded marketplace? And then the last thing here, just to like really make everyone fear old, is we just talked about Gen Z, and I always forget the name of the next generation. But this is the next generation that's going to be buying your products and services in the next, 2-3 years. They're going to be, going into college or starting new roles, new jobs. They're going to be looking to buy your products and services as well on their own. So you have to keep in mind, as these marketing platforms and channels and mediums evolve, how are you evolving with them?
Absolutely. And, our fellow marketing gurus out there are probably tired of talking about it and hearing about it. But after, the 5 years that shall not be named, that started in 2020, there is a drastic impact on the effectiveness of even just a paid ad. And really, tying back to your earlier point, if you don't have a strategy for how you're addressing the fact that a consumer may now need 6 to 12 touch points on a digital platform in order to actually hit buy and check out, you're losing money. You're throwing money out the door. And especially in situations where you can't measure that ROI, that may be tough for smaller organizations. I personally notice it every week. The amount of Amazon ads that I get if I scroll through Instagram, the amount of times I've added something to my cart, the amount of other sites that I've opened up Shop Now, added something to my cart and never checked out, my browsing history must be insane.
Oh man, Remy, the abandoned cart marketing that I've been getting from REI this past week has been fantastic. Which is funny that I mentioned REI because I just bought, some new hiking jackets, and when I went down to my mailbox to get said jacket, there was, a stack of envelopes in there, and I just did a quick shuffle through them, all right into the trash. There's so many broadband ones in there from a big national provider who shall not be named, who's being absolutely crushed by a local fiber provider now. But they go straight to the trash, and it just goes back to, who are you marketing to, right? Do you understand, in this national broadband provider's case, do they understand who lives in this apartment? To me, they don't, because it's been the same speed and price messaging that they blanket everyone with. I'm not interested in that. There's nothing in that ad that resonates with me. And they've also selected a medium that I told you goes right into my trash can.
Yeah, I don't know how many of your friends who are in the same age group as you, but I know personally my millennial friends, it's how many times do you even remember to check the mail?
Well,
in a week, and mine's right outside my door, and I don't remember it.
Remy, in the U.S., the post office has an app, and like mail and envelopes to get sent to you are scanned, so you can see images on the app. So I will not check my mail unless one, I have a package, or two, I have like an important document in the mail, which has never happened. So I'm like on a once every few months cadence for the post office, which is kind of weird to say, but going back to what we just talked about, understand who's buying your products and services,
Mm-hmm.
and be prepared for that next generation who's going to be buying your products and services. We're not 100 years ago. We're marketing, we're selling very differently today than we were previously. So that kind of leads us into kind of the second big conversation we want to had was mistakes that need to stop in 2025, especially as technology evolves. And the first mistake I want to talk about is, and I hear this one a lot, Remy, so I want to
Yeah.
hear your thoughts on this as well, but making the assumption that you don't have to market yourself. So, I've heard, oh, people know who I am, or we're the dominant player, or we don't want to overwhelm our business with new, people calling in and things like this. Huge mistake falling into that trap of we don't have to market ourselves.
Yeah, I love having this conversation with companies that don't think that they have a competitor just because there's not currently a competitor in their particular region or community. We, as a success organization, I think we talk about, even if you don't have a competitor at this time, or one that's in direct competition, be it technology type or particular service type, always act like there's someone on your heels, because with these national players and with the ease of which different companies can just pop up and take over because they are the new shiny object, you always have to be ready for it. And a part of that is not just the marketing component, it is the retention component, as we've talked about at length in this call already, or in this podcast, sorry, coming back to, are you continuing to have that why conversation with your subscriber, with your customer, with your end user the entire time that they're involved with your organization or your services? And then afterwards, if they part, how are you getting them back? And I think that's a really interesting look, is if you look at the marketing conversation around, is it us, or is it us versus them, or is it just about the consumer? And maybe that's not clear, but hopefully you grasped that based on my point. We're not bragging about ourselves. We're not competing. We're not saying, well, we're better than them, or we do this, knowing that the competitor is doing the opposite. It's really about talking and having that conversation with the consumer through your marketing, through your messaging. Why is this going to be different in your life? Why is this going to affect change? Why is this going to be valuable?
And let's talk about a hypothetical now. Let's say we don't do any marketing, right? What happens? Well, our customers and our prospects, they have to navigate the market or the area of our business on their own. So if we want to look at a broadband example, let's say we do no marketing. Well, if you start looking up internet, you might see things from fixed wireless providers, satellite providers, people that may not have physical infrastructure in your areas like you do. But now that's who your customers and your prospects are seeing, and that's what they have to make a decision between, this unknown player or this larger company that's going to have the funding to acquire that subscriber. Now, another thing I think we should look at is, let's look at a brand like Coca-Cola, Microsoft. Why are these big brands, some of the biggest brands on the planet, marketing? Why do they have such a consistent effort? And it's because all of this we just talked about.
Yeah, I think it's it's tough to say that those are the ideal standard, because a lot of organizations and companies out there don't have that same robust team. They don't have all of the marketing dollars and spend. But it really comes back to your point. Don't assume that you don't have to market yourself, either A, because you're the only provider, or B, because you think that it's your services and products speak for themselves. You always have to, especially in our over marketed world, you always have to come back to, it's a crucial component of your business strategic direction to ensure that something is being said to the folks that you're trying to bring in, because otherwise the back door is open and they are going to walk out as soon as a shiny object, squirrel, whatever you want to call it, comes into play. They're running
Yeah,
out the door.
if you're the dominant player in your market today, make sure you're doing your marketing, right? It's going to reinforce that brand loyalty, engage your existing customers. So a big focus on retention there. Maintain market control, of course. We're getting kind of the business area. But one of my favorites too is it gives you an avenue to introduce new products and services. Remy, if we want to go to like a broadband example again here, let's talk about outdoor Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi when you're walking down the street or across town or at different events, having that, fully connected town, I think that's huge. And if you're launching this new product and service that's brand new and people don't know who you are or what you do, you're going to struggle doing that. You're going to have to, go back up to square one and then, make your way into your new product and service. But again, if you have that marketing in your area, in your business, where people know who you are, you've followed all the best practices we've talked about today, you have that strategy, you'll be able to quickly launch those new products and services. And if we go back to the top of the podcast and talk about Frontier Airlines, launch a new baggage promotion to compete with your competitor. I hope I said that right.
Okay.
To compete with your competition. How many times can I say that? Within like a minute's notice.
Absolutely. There is a stat out there. I did grab this, part of our pre-podcast research, that customers who have an emotional relationship with a brand, and it could just be recognition of a brand, have a 3 times higher lifetime value. And then the sub point of that was 76% of consumers will buy from a brand they feel connected to over a competitor. That not only, to me, rings that revenue bell and take rate bell, but it also rings the reduction in churn, right? They are less likely to be diverted by a competitor's promotion that comes in to severely undercut you. And to your point, there's not as much of a lead up. We talk about customer education around products that maybe they're not familiar with. Same thing applies to brand recognition. Making sure they're familiar with you, they will be more likely to trust and buy from you than be swayed by some other type of, lackluster version of your product and services that may be coming into.
And as you do this, what else should you avoid? We-centered marketing. And I want to kind of combine this topic with the next topic too, but we-centered marketing is when you tell people what you do, but you fail to explain why it matters. You can't just talk about yourself. I feel like this is true in life too. But when you only talk about what you do as a business, you create a commodity. It's something everyone else does. And the thing I wanted to tie this into was AI and marketing. And Remy, over the past couple of years now, we hear AI this, AI that. Have you seen this solution do X, Y, Z? And it's great. AI is a fantastic tool, but it kind of brings up the question, is AI making marketing bland? And my thoughts on this is no, people are just using it wrong. AI can produce content faster, but you still need that strategy behind it. You can't let AI run the show. What is your human touch? What is your unique brand perspective? And I kind of mentioned this as a joke, but I said, your business, don't be the player, be the MVP. So use these modern, technology solutions, but keep that human touch and just make sure you're using it correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had a really interesting conversation about AI when I went on a family wedding trip recently. And
as one should always do at a wedding, talk about AI.
That's a perfect topic while you're waiting for food to come around. A cousin of mine applied for a job recently as a project manager for a company that is very, tech advanced and innovative in what they're doing. And part of the interview process, or part of the interview itself, was, hey, I'm going to give you a picture. I want to show you this picture on screen, and I'm going to ask you to open an AI chatbot of your preference, and I want you to recreate this as close as possible. I want to watch what prompts you're using. I want to watch how you're directing it to make an edit, and you only can send one initial prompt, and I believe it was one follow-up prompt to provide any corrections. And she was so surprised because she's not from an organization that uses AI very frequently. And I thought, how interesting, because to me, that seems like such a fun interview exercise, and I would love to do that. And I'm sure they're
when Gabe comes back, we should not, see if he listens to this episode, but we should do that with Gabe.
But I thought that was such an interesting thing, because not only, if you're not familiar with AI, does it show, your ability to flex and take on a new technical opportunity, but it allows the interviewer to assess the creativity, but also the familiarity with utilizing tools that we know are out there. Our college professors now know that AI is out there. They're trying to judge the students on their ability to use the platform versus preventing them from cheating. Same element. We know you're going to use AI in your role, but how are you going to use it effectively? And it's like having someone on your team that is an absolute ultra unicorn. We talk about never hiring the unicorns. Well, AI gives you a unicorn on your team, puts it in your lap. Be a better leader to that particular tool by giving it the right information it needs. And to your point, personalizing it. What it spits out, you don't have to use. You can either provide additional direction or take it and mold it. You're not building something from scratch, but you can put your personal touch on it.
And speaking of personal touch, authenticity, consumers value, I would say they crave authenticity.
Correct.
And this is where your ads don't feel like ads. Last week, we talked a little bit about a paint ad or a paint banner as you walked into Home Depot or Lowe's, or I can't remember the right business. I know there's a huge debate between Home Depot and Lowe's and Menards and whatever other big box store I forgot about. But when your ads don't feel like ads, it's a natural part of the conversation. I really like that. And when we go back to the authenticity component too, I mentioned I was shopping at REI this past week. One of the things I like about one of the items I bought was it's from Patagonia, and their whole brand, their products included, aligns with their values as a company. I feel like that's being very authentic and staying true to who they are.
Absolutely. I think it's a really fun exercise to play, to complete as a team, when you're looking at how are we going to go to market and what is our key value drivers and how are we communicating those in a way that hits on a particular person's trouble statement or problem statement, anything that they're trying to solve in their life. And what would you say if you were in store, you were the person working for the retailer, be it REI, be it Patagonia directly, and you have a customer come forward and say, hey, I have these two products, which one would you recommend? What things are you going to highlight? You know that they're going to personally be more affected by that. They're going to buy it because it's coming from a human. I thought it was really interesting. I looked into what the propensity of a consumer is to buy from a brand that has a face of the brand, or the CEO is really popular and really at the forefront of their branding versus not. And that creates authenticity, having a human to relate to, or having a human speaking to you directly. And brands with consistent presentation, including a recognizable face, are 3.5 times more likely to have higher brand visibility, which is awesome. And we know that does translate into sales.
And that goes back to, even as our smaller companies and businesses we work with, having that not only that brand advocate, but that influencer. Yes. And when we say the influencer, I feel like people immediately go to, MKBHD on YouTube with 20 million subscribers, or things like that. And that's not what that is an influencer, but that's not what it needs to be. If you have someone who's popular in your community, whether it's, your CEO or a CSR or, a technician, having that influencer and working with them on content and your marketing strategy, that's going to work very well. I can't tell you how many times I've seen social media posts where you include someone local that everyone knows. Those posts almost always perform so much higher than like the generic. I'm thinking specifically of my life in a financial institution during that time period we shall not mention, but our engagement on those influencer posts was always just significantly higher. And just as we kind of wrap things up here, speaking of influencers, endless scrolling. This is something that I really want to talk with Gabe about too. So I have to save a little bit of this for a future episode with Gabe. Remy, we can have you on for that as well. But one of the most popular ways to consume content is short form video. And that's, TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, things like this. But I keep going back to, it's great to get views. It's great to, produce a piece of funny content, but your followers are just endlessly swiping. You need to evolve. And I think of when you evolve, Instagram, as I'm told, used to be photos only, and now you can do videos, of course. But you have to consistently evolve with your audience. But when you do this, when you do something like short form video, it's a great way to spark curiosity and grab your audience's attention. What do you do with their attention once you have it? You bring them into high value content that builds trust and loyalty. So short form video is not going away, very popular, but just keep in mind, how are you driving conversions from that 30-second video, that 60-second video?
Yeah, be it, continued engagement in that way. Either it's another series that you're starting and, you setting the scene for another one to come, or be it, lead gathering and how you're going through lead generation in that way. I think something that I would particularly drive home with short form is that it also removes the required professional lens that sometimes our traditional marketing campaigns has, where it has to be this beautifully laid out and formatted to particular ratios as far as
It
a
ties
still
back into that
image,
authenticity.
and then or a professionally produced video. And the short form that does really well, I can call back to John DeRocher was highlighting the effectiveness of the Arlo secure cameras, patrolling his backyard for wildlife. It's not this beautiful, scenic view and people are reading from a script and hitting their mark. It's really just raw footage from his security camera, sharing it on LinkedIn. Folks are engaging with it. It's not even meant to necessarily be a full marketing campaign, but he's doing a series showing it, and it's highly effective in my eyes. Same thing with a small niche influencer or person of interest in your region, grabbing the phone, sitting on a live, or filming a quick reel where they're taking you through a day in their life and how the product or service affects their life. Equally relatable and authentic.
I love the day in the life series, especially for our industry, Remy, because the reality is like the internet's magic. How does it even like get to our house? And Gabe and I have always told people like steer away from like the strands of glass, the lasers, or like the light, and this conversation on your website. But having that as a series, like how the internet gets to your home, is a great opportunity to build brand awareness. And of course, in the broadband space, we had the episode with John a while back, and we talked about like it's a very unique touch point where someone's coming into your home, they're digging up your lawn in many cases, or they're modifying your property. What do they expect? How can we make this experience better for them and leverage this touch point? A day in the life video, great series to do. Well, Remy, thank you for joining us on this episode of Buffering, or Autopilot, as we mentioned. If you're still tuned in to the end of this episode and the many edits we just had to make to finalize this production, don't forget to follow Remy and I on LinkedIn. And don't forget to give the podcast a follow up. Remy, I'm sure you'll be back here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, looking forward to it anytime.